Hi.
Do you think, shit, what was I going to say? Do you think it's important to give objective representations of yourself, and especially of others, at the expense of second-guessing your own feelings on life? Is that the ethical path, or do you think it's more important to just have it as a given that, you know, I as the author have these views and this lens and these biases? What do you think?
I mean, I've always thought of, like, if science is trying to understand the world objectively, art is about understanding the world subjectively. So I would say that it's more important for an artist to give their own views, and I think it's less about whether people agree with them or not, but and more about just raising issues and just getting people to think about what do they really believe, why do they feel that way, and less about stating this is how something is or this is how something should be.
It would be interesting, I mean, this is what writers do. I mean, they create a fiction in which these characters may not represent what they feel at all. And that's, you know, a fabulous thing, that they have created a character that you can completely believe in, even though it's constructed, you know. And so that isn't being false to yourself. It's sort of like being able to imagine what it would be like to be that kind of person, and what you would say, what you would do, how you would interact with other people.
It's also kind of interesting because at a certain point, it really is about the mechanics of storytelling. I mean, there's no way that you could, there's no way, or it'd be difficult for you to have a left-wing character without a right-wing counterpart to highlight the distinction. And so inherently, and even if you're doing a character that is autobiographical or about you, there are certain times where you, in order to make the story move, are going to have to deviate. And so there's a lot of slippage. And I mean, I'm hearing that come through in your talks, and it's something that I also observe, and I think that's one of the things that's pretty interesting. And then it gets complicated by, you know, having an audience that wants to see or wants to identify something of the artist in the work, regardless of whether, without any foreknowledge of the author's true relationship to the work. So that work becomes a crossroads.
In Tales of Graceful Aging, I have a lot of scenes where I have these girlfriends. It's 3 girlfriends, and I'm the narrator of the story, and it's about us, you know, growing old together, the things we talk about, the situations we go through, and they're put together from the character of my friends. And another friend who wasn't in this group said to me, "I didn't know you were so important in the group." And I thought this was absolutely wonderful, because of course it's my book. I made myself the narrator. I made myself the person that everyone sort of listened to, even if they were irritated by them. But I created myself as a much more forceful person in my own society than I actually am. I mean, my friends would certainly not allow me to run roughshod over them as I did in the book. They would slap me down.
Are there any type of like situations in particular that after they happen, like you feel extremely inspired, like I need to make a comic about that? Just anything that happens often or even not often where you just feel like you really need to tell that story?
You get inspired by music, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's different though. Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I always try to, when I was writing my first book, I was kind of I started writing it while I was still in the relationship, and at some point, it reached this point where I was writing about things that had happened fairly recently, and it started to feel weird, like I was going to let the idea of writing about an event actually start to affect events. And so after that, I've always tried to let things settle quite a bit. And the only time that really I have that kind of inspiration to write about something right after it happened is usually just something funny happening that, like, I would make kind of a good gag. But especially for the more personal material, I always try to let it sit for a while and try and have a little more perspective before I sit down and write about it. And sometimes something that seemed like maybe it would be good to write about earlier starts to seem like not such a good idea or not so important to write about.
I have a real instinct to journal almost everything in my life, which is kind of unhealthy. So I found that most of my work that's better actually does sort of germinate for a longer time than what's immediate. But what's nice when you do keep a journal is that you can go back and reference the things that you were feeling and thinking at the time. So it's kind of a combination of immediate things and things that have been sitting for a long time. But that's it, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually, for me, I mean, it's something I read or a good conversation I had. You know, I don't know how many times like I've been out to coffee with friends or read this great bit of something. You know, I'm reading Nietzsche or something, and I'm just like, oh my God, you know. And I don't even know that I need to like make something about what I just read or what just happened as much as I just feel the need to make something. And obviously, it probably has something to do with what I just heard or what I just read. But you know, I might like read this great line from Zarathustra, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta go draw some guy, you know, with the giant machine gun like running through the alleyway. And I don't know what that's about, but I don't know. It's, you know, yeah, I guess it's more like, you know, getting inspired by everything that happens around you. I don't know. It's like, it's all the time, you know, all the time. You know, it's not a specific type of moment necessarily.
I love that combination of putting, you know, this heavy book and a machine gun in there. Because I was thinking when you're all talking about, you know, you're influenced by your life, and I think I'm influenced by movies, you know, and by certain scenes on television. You know, I love the moment when House, anyone watch House there? You know, when great, when, you know, his House is talking, someone's telling him a story about something completely different, and he gets that look on his face, and he solves the medical problem that's been eluding him, you know, at absolutely the last possible moment that he could save that person's life. You know, it turns out to be the chewing gum that they use, you know, rather than something big. So, movies are so compelling to me and so terrifying to me that I often won't go to see movies until someone's vetted them. And so what I do is I've had a character who comes and says to Sylvia, I would pay, you know, $500 if I didn't have to see, what's that? It's about insects, and they're ghettoized.
Avatar.
District 9.
District 9. I like to hear about District 9, but I'm not seeing District 9, so.